Imperfection. It scares us. As artists and human beings, we hide from it. But what if I told you that imperfection is the beautiful footprint of your artistic voice? What if I told you that you don't need to hide from it anymore? What if I told you that you simply need to learn to dance with it? Once you learn how to dance with it, you will make art as only you can make. Because you are unique. And your art matters. I created Essentials with a single absolute need in my heart: to help you discover this truth. To help you sculpting spontaneously and powerfully, while falling in love with the beauty of the human figure. To help you losing yourself in creative freedom while discovering the beauty and elegance of simplicity. To help you creating raw emotions while shining lights onto the essence of digital sculpture. And discovering that your perfect imperfection is the beginning of your beautiful artistic journey. Essentials is a collection of ever-evolving tools celebrating the essence of digital sculpture in Zbrush. It's the heart of my artistic and professional journey, and I sincerely hope it will help you discovering the beauty of creative freedom. First thing which you'll find in the Digital Clay Essentials package are 3 heads. These 3 study heads are primarily geared towards helping you out in internalizing and breaking through the first major insight of sculpture, which is nothing is flat, but stuff has a plastic structural component, which is pushing in, pulling out, carving in, slicing away. So by starting these heads, you will have the opportunity to, well, first of all, internalizing the correct proportions, but also you can use this, first of all, as a base mesh to start as a base to start your own sculptures, and as a very prominent abstraction which celebrates the main features of the head. So these heads are the results of a lot of years of study and struggle to understand the main features of the head in a very plastic, in a very structural, in a very constructive way. They help me out in my profession and they help me out in my art enormously. It's my hope that will also help you and that will become a trusted companion for your journey of art making and sculpture. Of course, with each one of these heads you have a few subdivisions to help you out in the sculpting process. The second feature we're going to find in the subtool are the proportion grids, and to see them I suggest you to just make visible one of these and click on either the first one or the second one. Now these 2 proportions grid are one of the most helpful sculpting aids, sculpting tools I use every time. I've been sculpting now for a bit more than 10 years, but I still use proportion grids every time to gauge my progress. Proportions are even more important to understand than anatomy. If you don't gain an instinctive understanding of proportions, your sculpture will lose that sense of truth we always talk about in the channel. I will make a further video just to talk about the proportion grids, but for now they're pretty self-explanatory. As I said, I will make a video about this because there are really a bunch of relationships in terms of proportions that we can create and internalize. They represent a lot of hard work and a lot of tradition and a lot of study. So I encourage you to use them and to internalize them as much as you can. Let's now look at the features on the top toolbar. The first section, it's a minimalist selection of extremely useful tools, which allows me not to lose focus during my digital sculpture process. The first one, it's simply the Reset Brushes button. This is very important in the Essentials toolkit just because all of the custom brushes I designed, they come with very specific default settings. For example, let's say I'm playing with this guy, okay, and I'm starting with these ideas, but I will change the focal shift too much and then I'll have weird results. I can just click on Reset Brushes and all of these guys that will go to their default values. Second tool, Close Holes. Close Holes is very useful in our digital clay process, as a lot of the times we use Dynamesh, or in this case Sculptris, to do some stuff, and it's very possible they will have some holes in the mesh. And I'll show you how it works, but also showing you the next two tools I specifically scripted. Let's make a quick mask, for example, here. We can delete all subdivisions, so if you click on this guy, delete all subdivision, this guy will delete all the lowers and all the higher subdivisions. And now what we can do is delete masked. So in ZBrush, it's usually it's the opposite, so it's delete unmasked. I simply scripted delete masked because I think it's a bit more useful and logical, at least in my sculpting process. And now let's see that we have this big hole. Simply click on Close Holes. With a few simple tools, we can quickly fill the mesh. Now the other one, it's the artery mesh. A lot of times, in cases like this, let's say that we want to have quickly a clean mesh. So usually what you would do is simply duplicating this guy and zero meshing it and reprojecting the details and reconstructing some subdivision levels. In this case, I can just click on artery mesh, click OK. The tool will do everything. Will duplicate your mesh, will zero mesh it, it will create subdivision levels, and it will reproject all of the original details on top of the new mesh. And you will have the new auto-remeshed geo on top of your subtool list. And there we go. You can see that now we have our remesh sculpt, and they're all automatically renamed. It's visible and it has cool clean geometry. You have your subdivisions there and you have your original sculpt. So in one simple click we go from here to here. We now reach the most juicy part, which many of you have been waiting for quite a long time now. And I've been working on these guys, I've been working on the brushes for quite a lot. And the main idea behind these brushes is that they will allow you to express yourself in a very organic, deliberate, but also spontaneous way. But before talking about each single brush, I want to show you the two materials which are also included, and you simply need to click on each one of them. So digital clay terracotta. This will give you an idea of terracotta, and we can try to fire a quick cinematic render of it to try and see. And so you can see in the bottom part, which is a bit more worked, it works very nicely. It sort of mimics very nicely the quality of a clay sketch. Second material is the material you probably already have. I share this, and you can download this material for free together with a few samples of my older light setups. So this is the signature digital clay material of the series. Slightly less shiny, I would say. Let's try to have maybe a different light setup. And you'll notice that the areas which are a bit more worked, they always behave a bit more realistically because, of course, clay is very alive. So it really depends on what you do with it. Now we reach probably the most requested and awaited feature of this Essentials toolkit, and it's the custom brushes. It's what you see is a set of 9 custom brushes, which I completely redesigned from scratch, and they represent everything which I've done throughout the series. The spark behind these brushes is not to give you a simple alpha or a simple stamp to repeat on the mesh, but the main idea behind all these guys is to give you a very organic and imperfect and spontaneous, powerful way to create digital sculpture in a way which makes you feel like you're really pushing and pulling the clay. We just want to have a few simple brushes which allows you full creative freedom. Let's see each one of them. So the first one is the basic one. So basically, they are in order of suggested use. So they're the most versatile towards the more textural and subtle ones. Okay, the first one is called Add and Push. Once you learn how to use it, and then you can start to create. Then you can start to create by literally feeling like if you are pulling inside the clay with your finger. So it's a very simple brush with a very simple alpha. It's all within the settings. And the idea of this guy is that, maybe you're just at the beginning, low subdivision levels, and so you just want to create a lot of quick mass, okay? And so you can just use it in a very immediate way. But then I recommend you to immediately go on top of it and use the Alt brush. This is really when the Add and Push comes alive, because it creates the sort of sense of, hey, now I'm carving in. And literally, I recommend you to play with to use a tablet, absolutely, or even more a Wacom monitor tablet or a Huion monitor tablet or whatever you prefer, because that's when you will really, really feel the sensitivity of the brushes, and really that will start to feel like clay. And as you see, we don't have a massive alpha on these guys. We don't have actually very complex alphas. It's all about learning to use them. So they're actually quite tricky, these brushes, because you need to learn, you need to learn to feel them but it's all I'm doing now. Basically, I'm drawing a stroke and then going on top of it with Alt. And as you can see, literally, it's like if you're plugging if you're pressing with your fingers in it. So this is the most versatile. We can use it in a more textural way. For the second brush, I want to show you in action with what I did with my episode 9 sculpt. So let's say that we want to work on this kind of ideas like I did on the hair. So that is where this brush comes in. Okay, so it's big ideas, bolder. Still with a very clay-like feel, but more messy. So just be aware that when you're using this guy, you will have a bunch of interesting. It all depends on your hand, Play with your hand, be very sensitive with your hand, and don't be afraid of all these marks, because this is what we're after actually. When you clean them, remember, you will train your artistic sensitivity, you'll train your artistic path in understanding what to keep and what to discard. That's part of that beautiful, perfect imperfection we mentioned is in episode 9, and that's the whole idea behind all these brushes, perfect imperfections, going after that authentic, human-like quality. Okay, we don't care too much about perfect stamps or alphas. We want these very strong organic brushes to help us in breaking through our creative freedom, you know. The third brush is called layers. This is literally, so you want to be very subtle with it, but you can also be very bold, you know. Alt will not work with this, so don't use Alt. So it's really cool because it gives that sort of clayish idea. It gives you layer, you know, when you can sometimes also you want to have that sense of layering, and you will see how they all interact with each other. Brush number 4, dry finish. You can use it either at low Z intensity to create the dry texture. You will see that when you have very clean areas of your sculpture, this allows you to break the flat idea of the sculpture. You will see that on the nose, for example, here. Don't use it too much because you know, you need to develop a sensitivity with these brushes. Okay, or then you can use it with, this case it will become a very textural brush, and literally it changes the dynamics, sort of brushed finger brush idea. The fifth brush, the broken comb, this is the more particular one to use, and maybe you can do something like this with this brush. Okay? And you will notice that usually you want to use it with quite a clean surface, and this guy reacts to your hand very, very quickly. So see how it changes, see all the beautiful variations that happens. You need to spend time and become quite intimate with these brushes. Usually I use this brush in combination with old spatula, which is basically this sort of and creates this sort of very cool textured effect. The last two, they are a bit more of there are two variations of knives. The first one is an engraving knife, and I usually use this to create this sort of variations. You can use it like this to create a bit more of texture, or to create for example annotations like I did in the digital clay study head. This is done with this is done with the engraving knife. Or you can also use it in this case with a very small size and with a very low intensity, 1 or even 2, to create a tiny bit of rough marks on your sculpture. Okay, maybe you use your knives. I use them, and I use them a lot in this way, in this sort of textural way. If you want to have a very in-depth overview of how I use these brushes to create this guy, you can just check out episode number 9. It's me basically for 1 hour improvising and riffing with the Digital Clay Essentials brush kit. The other thing you will find in your essentials are the light setups. Okay, let's see some of these lights in action. Okay, let's now reach the cinematic render. This will automatically apply a combination of filters and render settings, which will create the signature look using my renders. I suggest you to use the template Essentials ZBrush scene whenever you want to have the best results for the cinematic render. In this way, you can easily match your sculpture size and scale to the template heads, and this will allow you the best results in terms of the cinematic render. Also notice that if you will change the focal length of your camera from the settings which are in the Digital Clay Essentials scene, most likely the depth of field, blur, and some other effects will need to be calibrated again. You will need to go into the BPR filters and play again with the range. And also remember, the cinematic render button will actually set all of the parameters of the render settings. So if you play with something and when you want to customize it a little bit, remember after the first time you used it to then use the normal BPR render by either pressing Shift R or just clicking manually Best Preview Render. It's always been a pain for me to generate turntables or renders or animated renders from Zbrush. And so I created my own little tool which basically automatically renders either a 360 turntable of your sculpt from your current camera position, or the other option is that instead of generating a 360, you can actually generate a render of your animation timeline. So let's say that I want to create a render like this one. First, we want to make sure we created at least 2 keyframes in our timeline. The timeline is accessible from the movie palette. Mine is a very simple beginning and end frame. Now, second thing, remember the 360 tool will generate a render sequence by using the latest BPR render settings in your scene. So first, we need to make sure we're satisfied with our BPR render. Now, once you're happy with your animation and your BPR render, we are ready to render. Just click on the 360 button, select the folder where you want to save out the resulting image sequence, and now you'll be prompted with the option rendering a 360 animation by clicking yes or by clicking no. The tool will actually render out your own custom timeline. So the tool will go through and generate a 30 frame per second image sequence based on the total length that you set up in your movie palette. At the end, just head into the folder which you set, and you will see a PNG render sequence which you can quickly put together into a movie in your favorite editing software. What if you want to instead render out a 360? So you don't need any keyframes, just click on 360 again. This time, instead of pressing no, just press yes. So pressing yes will output the 360 and pressing no will output the custom animation from your timeline. We're at the end of our walkthrough for our Essentials Toolkit. My most treasured sculpting principles and digital tools which I use are contained in this minimal toolkit, and at the base of this toolkit, at the base of Essentials, it's the same spark which is at the base of the whole Digital Clay project. We want to disintegrate the barrier between traditional and digital sculpture. We try to declutter the amazing complexity of this program of Zbrush and transform it into an extension of your hands and your heart so that you can literally focus on what matters most. I hope this tool will help you into breaking through those barriers and into feeling that your sculpture matters, because it does. So if you want to know more about Essentials, you just need to check out the website digitalclay.xyz, or just look at the description. You will find all the links. You will find the links to the Facebook community where you can just come in and share your experiments and find some sincere and honest support for your work. We're creating a very special community centered around the art of sculpture in digital clay. So thank you for being part of this. Thank you for appreciating and actually showing up and putting your art out. Stay safe and keep sculpting.